Today, I'll be teaching you a super powerful tool that extremely few people know about in Mario Maker called assisted loading. Assisted loading lets us break the regular limitations of how the game brings new entities into existence by spawning them from way farther away than they normally should. Before I get to that, first you'll need to understand the entity limit, or the ELB, so you can understand the experiments I'll be showing you here. In brief, Mario Maker can only have 100 entities loaded before spawners can no longer spawn entities. Steve went into this in a lot more detail, but for today, I'll just be using the ELB to check if entities are loaded, i.e. whether or not something exists in the world of Mario Maker. As a quick demonstration, here I have 96 one-way walls, which are special in that they are entities that load from anywhere in the map. Since the limit is 100, placing these one-way walls means that there's only 4 open slots left to spawn new entities, meaning that I can only spawn 4 munchers before the rest of these blocks become duds. If I add this bomb and this flimsy lift to the area, they will also take up 2 of those 4 slots, leaving only 2 slots open for new munchers. Now in Mario Maker, entities load in when they are in a 3-block range of the visible screen border, which I've highlighted here with these mushroom platforms. So even if we can't see them here, as long as these entities are in that range, they will still be loaded, and they will still count to the entity limit. Now we get to the fun part of assisted loading. If I were to put this bomb outside of this range, now it's too far, which opens up an extra slot because it's not loaded, so I can only have 3 munchers. Super easy. Now if I were to move this flimsy lift out of range too, then it should also not be loaded, so I should have slots open for all 4 munchers. What? Well, as it turns out, there's some special entities in the game that spawn farther away than just this limited 3-block window. This includes lifts, claws, and seesaws, just to name a few. And so, why is that? Well, lifts move around, are wide, and usually hold enemies and items on them. If the lift itself does not load early, then that would lead to jank, where the entity should be on a lift, but instead it falls down because the lift has not loaded yet. I.e. there's no platform to support it because, as far as the game is concerned, it just doesn't exist yet. Well, that's all fine and dandy. That explains why the lift loads from extra far, but why is the bomb loading too? If you remember, we were only getting 2 munchers instead of 3 or 4. So imagine if you put a bomb on the lift in an editor. You expect that when Mario runs into the lift, he encounters a bomb walking on a lift. Now imagine a world where the lift loads earlier, but the bomb loads normally. What can happen is that the lift goes on its merry way, and then later the bomb loads in and just drops straight through because the lift just left it behind. This would cause all sorts of terrible jank. So instead, the game does something very special when it notices that you put an entity on a lift in the editor. The game realizes, hey, you probably want this entity to be on this lift when Mario runs into it. So it loads both of these 2 things together at the same time. This is called an assisted load because the bomb's loading is assisted by the lift. The lift gives its super special long-range loading property onto the bomb. This is extremely powerful for making contraptions in Mario Maker because if we want to hide a big device, we're always limited to this dinky little 3-block wide window if we want to keep our devices hidden. Any bigger than that and either your device won't work or the player will be forced to see some confusing mechanical abomination that can really distract them from the actual gameplay in your level. Assisted loading lets us make bigger devices while keeping the magic under the hood and tidy. And just to be clear here, this is very different from global ground and global loading. Global ground stops entities from despawning, whereas assisted loading helps them spawn earlier. As an example, this star detector uses this muncher with an assisted load into this claw to allow the entire device to be hidden behind a scroll stop. I'd like to share a contraption that uses this technique to function. Here I have a jump detector based on the SMB2 mushroom in the night ground theme. Many of you may have seen this mechanic used before, but what's special about this specific model of jump detector is that it is completely robust about how Mario scrolls into the device. So whether Mario scrolls into it horizontally from the left, or if Mario were to scroll into it from above or below in a vertical world, no matter what, this detector will function and load properly. One of the key pieces of this jump detector is the muncher placed right here, which both increases the speed of the detection and makes it reliable so you don't miss a hit. Because if you miss a detection of a jump in a jump detector level, the consequence is normally death. This muncher is outside of this 3-block window. However, we can use an assisted load with this flimsy lift to make sure that this muncher loads in properly, and so the entire device can be completely hidden behind a scroll stop. So, case closed, right? As long as you put something on a lift, seesaw, or another entity from a super special set of course parts, it just loads early, right? Well, let's test that a little bit. So let's give this lit bomb a key. So normally what will happen is that this lit bomb will explode, giving Mario a key to be able to enter this locked door. So with an assisted load, we expect Mario to just be able to wait here for his bomb buddy to explode and give him the key. Right? Well, we can wait here forever, but Mario will not be getting that key anytime soon, without scrolling over the screen. But why, if that bomb is loaded? This brings us to a very big concept: placeholders. When you put an enemy on a lift in the editor, the game does load it in, but it doesn't get loaded in properly. Now, again, imagine if we have a bomb on a lift in the editor. If the bomb loads in early, it would get a ton of time to walk off a lift before Mario gets close. That isn't really what you want to happen when you put an enemy on a lift, because what you want to happen normally is Mario runs into a lift with a bomb walking off of it. The game has a second, super special hidden mechanic that stops that from happening, called placeholders. Placeholder entities aren't like real entities. They are like an IOU for an entity. Placeholders will ride whatever object they're on, such as a moving lift or a seesaw. They are designed to literally just hold the place of the entity so that when Mario runs into them, the plumber will just run into a regular old Goomba or whatever walking off of a seesaw. Unlike normal entities, placeholder entities lose almost everything that's special about them. So placeholder bombs don't explode, placeholder Goombas do not walk, placeholder P-switches don't activate, placeholder spike balls don't roll, etc, etc, etc. So placeholders only really do two things. They count to the entity limit, and they can keep whatever collision properties of what they are a placeholder of. So by collision properties, I mean first you can push them around like normal, and second, they can collide with objects as they normally would, even if they don't activate. So take this placeholder P-switch for instance. This placeholder P-switch can fully support the weight of this giant muncher as a placeholder, and only when the P-switch enters its proper loading zone to become activatable, then the P-switch activates and can no longer support the muncher's weight. So great. Now that we know everything we spawn from a range is totally useless, what is the point of this video? Well, hold up. Not all hope is lost. There are special ways to convert placeholder entities into fully interactable entities without bringing them into the proper loading zone close by. In other words, we can give these entities back their whole set of quirky features that make them useful for contraptions. Now, the main way to do this is to disrupt the connection between the entity and the original flooring that it was on, in this case, a flimsy lift. Now, as far as subpixels go, flimsy lifts are ever so slightly lower than ground. So if I were to take a singular ground tile and put it right under this bomb, voila! Now we have a fully functional, walking, exploding bomb ready for action. I call this an interactable state because the entity is not just loaded, but can also interact with the rest of the level like normal. Alternatively, you can take a more brute force approach to use, let's say, a block on tracks to literally push the bomb off of the lift or prop it up off the lift. And in both cases, it will work just fine. But normally, the easiest way to go about this is to just put ground below the entity and you're good to go. This isn't just limited to ground tiles. Most terrain or terrain-like assets can also convert your placeholder into a fully interactable object just fine. Additionally, some entities do some pretty weird things as placeholders, especially spike balls. I know I've been focusing on assisted loading for contraptions because, well, that's my jam. But assisted loading is also very helpful for kaizo levels to avoid jank that comes from entities not being loaded yet. Here I have a very stripped down version of a setup from a 3D World level sent to me. What is supposed to happen is Boomerang Mario throws a boomerang into the clear pipe, which then hits a red POW, which opens the path forward. This was a problem because the original level had many obstacles in the way that could potentially slow down Mario. It is very likely that Boomerang Mario will not be able to make it far enough in time for the red POW to load. And when the red POW doesn't load, the path does not get open. The reason this was a problem in the original level is that when the red POW doesn't spawn in time and doesn't open the path forward, it's not clear what went wrong for you to figure out how to make the setup work. As a very simple fix, I recommended to the maker that he use some cloud lifts to get an assisted load onto the red POW and the thwomp. That way, with the extra spawning range, even if Boomerang Mario goes through the obstacles very slowly, the boomerang would definitely hit its target and the confusion would be avoided. While there are some exceptions, the rules I showed in this video should work for the vast majority of contraptions you'd want to make. I'm going to close out by listing some of the main course parts that do give an assisted load. On screen, you'll see their loading ranges. So if an entity is anywhere on top of them in this picture, you'll be getting an assisted load. First, we have lifts. Flimsy lifts, cloud lifts, related. We also have seesaws, which have the biggest loading range in 2D World, as well as lava lifts, and claws, which will give an assisted load to anything in their grip. Everything I showed you works basically the same way in vertical worlds, although the values for the ranges are different in vertical worlds. You'll notice that I did not mention snake blocks at all, and that's not a mistake. Snake blocks, while they feel like they might work similarly, they don't. They don't give an assisted load, and yes, that is very janky and exploitable. But that's another story for another day. I'm also neglecting the #1 biggest, most powerful item in the game that gives an assisted load. Locked away in 3D World, this item, the track block, is generally regarded as absolute garbage because people just do not know how to unlock its full potential. I'll have to show you that next time because the track block has so much power behind it, that's a whole video unto itself. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully you learned something useful to make your own contraptions in the future. If you like this content, feel free to subscribe, and I'll see you around, guys. Later.